I am not where you are, obviously. So if you could open up to the start of Act 3, that would be great. And I think the list of names of character names is on the table adjacent to my table with the computer. So if a teacher right now could push pause and you could start reading, that would be great. So the first part is on page 84. Judge Hawthorne says, "How do you know then you are not one?" And if I don't know if we haven't seen this part in the movie yet, I don't think, although you might have watched a little more yesterday. But when he says this, he's asking her and he says, "So are you a witch?" And she says, "I don't even know what a witch is." And then he comes back with this, and the look on his face is he's very pleased with himself for such a witty comment. And also he thinks it's a smart comment because it's proving that she might be a witch, right? She might be one if she doesn't even know what it is. But it doesn't make the witch trials look all that good, right? When one of the more powerful people in this whole trial is saying kind of ridiculous things like that, and then kind of self-satisfying laughter afterwards, it doesn't make the whole trial look very good. Also, I don't know if any of you have seen the book The Scarlet Letter lying around. I'm teaching that in advance, but that was written by Nathaniel Hawthorne, another 130 years later, and he's a descendant of this judge who was very embarrassed by what the judge did in this trial. So if we could push pause again. Down the page a little bit with Giles being carried in. As these trials keep going, right, and the more people that get arrested and the more people that confess and the more people, especially as people start to get hung, then the people running the trials really don't want to hear any evidence to the contrary. And when people come and try to challenge it and say things that might make the court look like it's not real or not valid or not telling the truth or doesn't know what it's doing, the judges take that really seriously, right? So especially once someone gets hung, if then someone comes with evidence and says, yeah, these trials aren't real, there really was no witchcraft, and Abigail admitted a long time ago that this didn't have to do with witchcraft, they don't want to hear that, right? Because if that turns out to be true, then the judges made a big mistake, hung an innocent person, and it makes all the trials look bad and makes the judges look really bad. Take a pause. On page 85, Parris steps in and says, Giles Corey, sir, in a more contentious. And what he's getting at with that, a lot of times throughout the play, Reverend Parris is focused on two things. Initially, in the beginning, he was scared because his daughter couldn't wake up, right? But his biggest issue is that he wants to remain the minister in the town. And so a lot of his behavior is driven by that fact. He wants to make sure that he keeps his gig, right? Excuse me. And so what he does is he starts to try to discredit people when they come in. He's always pushing the trials, because by pushing the trials, it makes him look like he is definitely not on Team Satan, right, and didn't have anything to do with the witchcraft or the dancing in the woods going on. He's trying to distance himself from all of that stuff involving his family by pushing the trials really hard and making it seem like he's really a big fan of the trials and thinks they're very important. Pause. Page 86, Giles is getting quite upset because his wife got arrested, right? And I don't know if you remember this, but back in Act 1, when Reverend Hale, the witchcraft expert, showed up, one of the first things Giles did was ask questions about the weird things his wife does. Now, I think I gave you this advice at the time, but if I didn't, I want to give it to you now. I can't guarantee your life will be good if you follow this advice, but I can pretty much guarantee it won't if you don't. If a witchcraft expert ever comes to your house, don't start asking them weird questions about your family members. It won't end well for you. Pause. All right, on page 87, top of page 87, it says, Francis, Excellency, we have proof for your eyes. God forbid you shut it to them. The girls, sir, they are frauds. So this kind of relates back to the point I was making before. His proof that he has, right, and also Giles Corey, too, is going to come forth and say one of his neighbors overheard Thomas Putnam say he's killing their neighbors for their land. What he means by that is, and we talked about this earlier, but when you're accused of being a witch, if you admit it, that you were working with the devil, that means you're not a witch anymore, right? And then you point out other people to kind of hit that point even harder and really prove to everybody that you're not a witch. But you then end up forfeiting your land and property. You lose all your stuff, right? And there's only a few people in town who are wealthy enough to buy up that land, and notably, one of them is Thomas Putnam, right? So a lot of the accusations come from Thomas Putnam and his wife and his daughter, and Francis Nurse lives right next to them on their land, right? And so he's got 600 acres adjacent to their land, and this is the type of thing that they would like to call someone out on, one of those people being a witch, because then Putnam can buy up those 600 acres next to them and have 1,200 acres. Pause. Now, at this point, Giles Corey has tried to challenge the court, Francis Nurse has tried to challenge the court, and Proctor finally brings Mary Warren in. Now, Mary Warren knows without a doubt that this, at least the particular incident that Proctor's wife was arrested for, is not real. Mary Warren was sitting in court, and it was a long proceedings, and so during that time she was making a doll. She was knitting it, right? Abigail was sitting next to her, and she saw what she was doing, and when Mary Warren finished making that doll, she took the needle and stuck it inside the doll so that when someone picked up the doll, they wouldn't prick their finger with it, right? Abigail saw that, stabbed herself with the needle, and then said that Elizabeth did it. Okay, now Mary Warren coming to the court, there's a lot of pressure on her and a lot of danger for her, right? Remember back in the beginning when all the girls were up in that bedroom when Betty couldn't wake up and Abigail kind of laid down the story that they're going to tell? That no one's going to say anything else about dancing and Ruth Putnam contacting the spirits of her dead babies. But outside of that, if anyone says anything else, Abigail's going to come basically stab him in the face in the middle of the night. And she seems like a scary enough person that she might do it, right? And if it turns out that the court believes Mary Warren, not only Abigail, but all the other girls could get hung, especially Abigail, but because she would have been the one that was directly lying. So this is a very pressure-packed situation for her. Pause. Now, as more and more people, and this is on page 89 with Danforth saying, "Indeed not, but it strike hard upon me that you dare come here with such a tale." As more and more people start to come and challenge the court, right, it's hard for Danforth to believe them, and he doesn't want to admit it. But he brings up an interesting point about the title of the book. It said, before he listens to Proctor, he says, "Now, Mr. Proctor, before I decide whether I shall hear you or not, it is my duty to tell you this. We burn a hot fire here, sir, and melts down all concealment." Title of the book is A Crucible, and crucible means two things. One, a severe test or trial, which is what all the people who are on trial went through. And also, a crucible is a term used in chemistry, and while I'm not, I haven't used one of these, I do know that through heat and pressure, it causes a substance to split into two, right? And so the heat and pressure of the trials kind of causes people to split into one of two groups. Either they're honest and deny that they were working with the devil, which is telling the truth, and they get hung for it, or they lie and say that they were so that they can live. But people get split into those two groups in the same way that the substance gets split into two parts. Pause. On page 90, Proctor is getting questioned before they're going to bring in Elizabeth to confirm his story, and Proctor says, I have no love for Mr. Parris. It is no secret, but God surely I love. And Cheever replies, "He plows on Sunday, sir." One of the and we talked about this a little bit with the notes, but Puritans really wanted to demonstrate that they were good people and going to heaven, right? Very religiously stuff, believe or don't believe in whatever you want. This is just kind of historical, right? Anyway, people's reputation and the little things that they do really goes a long way towards determining that. And so people are always kind of checking each other out and saying, are people doing what they're supposed to do? Are they working when they're supposed to? Are they praying when they're supposed to? Blah, 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 all the way down the road with all the things. And so little things like him plowing on Sunday, which he's not supposed to do, it's supposed to be a day of rest, in the eyes of some of the people in the town who think he's guilty anyway, makes him look extra guilty and makes him look not as religious as he seems. So there's a lot of this kind of superficial surface stuff with Puritanism, and that's why most books about Puritans kind of reveal them as being fairly hypocritical. Pause. I'm back. On page 91, and Proctor says, God tells us that. To Danforth, who tells us Rebecca Nurse murdered 7 babies by sending out her spirit? Now, I don't know if you remember this, but when Reverend Hale first came into town, one of the very first people he met was Rebecca Nurse. And he'd never seen her before, but he'd heard about her reputation. And she said, "Do you know me?" And he said, "Well, you look as such a good soul should. Your reputation extends far beyond you, and even in the town of Beverly, we've heard of your good deeds." She is such a good person that her reputation already extends to the neighboring towns, right? But, as we said earlier, her land lies up next against the Putnams. And so Ann Putnam, remember when she sent her daughter to contact the spirits of the dead babies? She accused Rebecca Nurse of sending out her spirit to kill her babies. Now, the problem with this, as with all supernatural crimes, and Danforth makes this distinction, is if you're accused of sending your spirit out to hurt someone or do something, is there any way you can argue against that? It's really hard to prove that, no, that wasn't me, that wasn't my spirit, because it's not something that you can see, right? So that's the kind of problem with this whole trial. It's really hard to prove you weren't. It's almost impossible to prove you weren't. And so the only way to prove you weren't is to say that you were, if that makes sense. This is a strange play. It's a strange time in American history. And I think that's about it for today. So I will very likely see you on Monday. So thank you for bearing with me on this. I hope it went well. Have a good weekend. Do good, be good. Bye.